Hello, welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. I'm Bruce. Julie will be joining me in a minute. And this is the ruminations we do. This is the preview for episode 79, the next time in history or the next period in history. What it is a series of ruminations we do once a week. We do a preview on Wednesday, and then we do a full episode live stream on Sunday morning at 2 a.m. So, anyway, this is. The beginning of that. This is the preview for the coming piece. Thank you, P.
Have to grab my notes.
Tease T, our loving sponsor. We love you guys.
Sponsor.
Yes. Okay.
You've
So
turned a lot of people on.
we have, and I think they've helped us in terms of like getting people to kind of like get up to become part of our little family. We now have we're up to 324 subscribers, which is pretty amazing considering the fact it's all basically word of mouth and we're not doing anything out additionally other than kind of like being in the kind of small communities that we're in, that we're getting that to get our attention.
We're grassroots.
Yes, exactly. And
they're all real people.
They are, exactly. Yes. I kind of we know most of them by name.
Yeah, well, yes.
It's kind of cool. I love that actual.
We're hand selecting them because
they're hand picked.
Yes,
they're organically grown.
Yes, they are, because we want to have articulate, cultured, imaginative, and discerning individuals as our art science complex subscribers.
Right now, I kind of promised I was going to read a piece because this is like, we've talked about this idea of a dissatisfaction with the work of the time, and then the kind of desire to kind of move forward. And we talked a lot about the term inertia as a kind of term to describe that which is kind of holding back. Also, I talked about the difference between geniuses and then that of the kind of caretakers within the institution. So anyway, so to begin with, right, we have to remember that the valuable intellectual development is self-development, and that it mostly takes place between the ages of 16 and 30. As to training, the most important part is given by mothers before the age of 12. A saying due to Archbishop Temple illustrates by meaning surprise was expressed that the success in afterlife of a man who was at rugby had been somewhat undistinguished. He answered, "It is not what they are at 18. It is what they become afterwards that matters." In training a child to activity of thought, above all things, we must beware of what I will call inert ideas. That is to say, ideas that are merely received into the mind without being utilized or tested or thrown into fresh combinations. And this is the kind of thing that I think makes the difference between when an institution basically becomes simply the caretaker of ideas to basically become the inhibitor against the generation of the next genius. In the history of education, the most striking phenomenon is that the schools of learning, which at one epoch are alive with ferment and genius, in the succeeding generation exhibit merely pedantry and routine. The reason is that they are overladen with inert ideas. Education from inert ideas is not only useless, it is above all things harmful. Corruption of the is the best of the best. Corruption of the best is the worst is the English translation of corruptio optima passima, which is basically, I guess, the Latin that is used here. Except at rare intervals of intellectual ferment, education in the past has been radically infected with inert ideas. That is the reason why uneducated, clever women who have been much of the world are in middle age, so much the more cultured part of the community. They have been saved from the horrible burden of inert ideas. Every intellectual revolution which has ever stirred humanity into greatness has been a passionate protest against inert ideas. Then, alas, with pathetic ignorance of human psychology, it has proceeded by some educational scheme to bind humanity fresh with inert ideas of its own fashioning. So we see the fact that once this principle is when ideas that are merely received into the mind without being utilized or tested or thrown into fresh combination. As White has said, it's probably one of the most important thing that he's ever said in this book. He says, education is the acquisition of the art of the utilization of knowledge. And I think what happens is it's simply the way in which the mind becomes able to formulate, be able to speculate, to be able to kind of look into things and kind of be able to see perspectives of a kind of like architecturally provocative nature. Now, that's the end, that's my own paraphrase. But Whitehead's The Aims of Education, that's where we start. Where are we headed? How are we getting there? What happened and who are we? I would say that we're entering what I would call the organic age. And that's my own personal feeling based on the things I see happening around me. So that's my brief introduction. Not so brief, but my loved one.
Yes, and I only ate 3 of my dark
Oh,
chocolates.
thank you,
and saved
P.
those for
Thank you,
you.
P.
We only had 5
Thank you,
each.
P.
I thought you would appreciate it.
Mhm.
Topically, on Saturday night, late, which Bruce calls early Sunday, but I like to call late Saturday.
Let's call it Rebecca.
Great idea. We could also call it capers because I'm a big fan
Okay.
of pickled flower
Okay.
buds.
Okay.
Anyway, I will be discussing animal linguistics, specifically the first ever proof of complex phrases and syntax amongst the Japanese tit, which is a bird that was much studied and is still being studied by a fascinating Japanese man who is an ornithologist, an animal linguist, among many other things, and name of Suzuki Toshitaka. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He spent 10 years in direct close observation. I will get more into that, but I will suffice it to say he identified and quantified, that's the PDF,
Yeah, thank you, Pete.
over 200 individual words used by the tit and was able to equate bird sounds. And these are not just calls. They're clarion calls to action, they're warnings, they are directions, they're terms of endearment, they are instructive. It was fascinating, and the Japanese tit forms these words into ever evolving sentences and phrases,
Interesting.
which take on different meanings. And why will I be talking about this? Because we must now rewrite the entire history of avian linguistics. So when present observations upend all assumptions and human prejudices regarding animal intellect, animal intelligence, animal invention, and linguistic capabilities, a new and wholly altered future treatise must be scribed. And that's my quote. And I'm also starting to read a phenomenal book called Animal Architecture that I got for you, but I started. It's a great book. So
in a different time, in an earlier time when people were a little less fragile, I might have made a joke about the fact that, like, you found a Japanese tit. No way. That's ridiculous. I thought that was a contradiction in terms.
That's
I wouldn't say that now.
No,
right?
And
so
I didn't hear it now.
So I won't say that because it's the kind of thing that a lot of people be offended by.
Yeah.
Except Japanese people, because they're not, white liberal women.
No, they actually have a good sense
Portland.
of
But
humor.
anyway, in that case, I mean, like, I didn't, I would, so that's why I say it. I would never say that now. I would definitely have said it then. But I think that it's interesting because I think one of the things that Bronowski talked about in relationship to his critique of Chomsky was that Chomsky felt in this kind of romantic sense that language was in fact something specific. There was specifics to human language that was different from the character of animal language. Now, in this case, that possibility kind of comes under question. But again, I think a lot of these things fall by the wayside when one kind of looks at the organic age. I think that the machine age and the modern age had a certain primacy of the idea of the anthropocentrism of humanity was still around, as well as the fact that the machine was considered the ultimate kind of circumstance. Now, I think as time has gone on, and certainly in the last 60 years, we've seen that much be challenged by the idea of the fact that the organic world is much more sophisticated, much more complicated than we ever gave it credit to, and in fact is much more sophisticated, much more developed than we are. And I think now we realize that we've gone from that position where we still had this hierarchical circumstance where humans were at the top of the food chain and the top of the intellectual pyramid. We're now starting to see the fact that that's actually woefully inadequate to think that way. And we do our best to kind of try to level up as best we can. In fact, you used the example before about the idea of the sound. And
Oh yes, the bumblebees
was much more sophisticated in understanding, appreciating sound than the greatest musicians of our in that we could ever think of, way beyond, Salieri, way beyond Mozart, or beyond, kind of Paganini or Sarasate, or any kind of virtuoso, or any kind of composer. So that I find is kind of very much about this idea of an organic age.
Yes, and if I may add on to the Science research article just published last month in Science, the bumblebee rhythm, adaptation, and perception article made a really, really interesting point, a salient point, which is that bumblebees don't just recognize self-generated sounds, because humans would think in their conceit that an animal that makes its own sound would only know, appreciate, and interpret that group of sounds, that family of sounds. What they were doing was exposing the bumblebees to human-generated sounds, meaning sounds which would be in an alien realm, but the bumblebees not only picked up on it, they could invent with it, build upon it, link it up in very much the same way that the Japanese tit links up words for very complex ideas and instructions.
And in fact, the large part would be able to interpret and analyze foreign noise, foreign vibrations and sensations beyond itself. So it's like this naive idea of all they do is talk to each other and send each other signals, and not think about the fact that in fact what they're doing is kind of understanding, appreciating, and getting the systems and the structures of these things that it's constantly receiving, not just for kind of, to kind of like sustain itself, but in order to kind of understand and appreciate those patterns themselves. Okay, so I think that's kind of the beginning. We've kind of talked about things related to this topic, but this will be fun because we'll actually be able to talk specifically about this topic in relation to that.
Well, I'm going to dangle a beautiful little chocolate-covered wild blueberry in front of our new subscribers. We will also be talking about, and I have extremely detailed notes and did some additional research on the tonka bean. I won't say much else about it, but we will be talking about how plants plan and formulate, imagine, and manifest their own futures. So epigenetic adaptations for future success. And I will leave it at that with tonka beans and coumarin, and you guys can look it up or just wait for us to explain it and discuss it.
Yeah. Also, we apologize for being late tonight. We both had commitments and just kind of came in, so we kind of apologize for that. But we will basically be on time on Sunday.
Yeah, but we have active and busy lives,
and so do I.
Anyway,
any last words?
Yes.
A lot of pollen out there.
Oh God, the pollen. I have a new term that you all are going to love, which I'll be talking about on Saturday. The term is culinary math.
Oh, interesting.
And I will leave it at that. Everyone's going to be scratching their heads in anticipation of culinary math. and it's not what you think.
Okay. So
All right.
we'll look forward to seeing you, listening to you. Leave a chat, leave a message.
Of
We'd love to hear
course.
it. Okay. The realm of ideas is free to all and it's to benefit all for us to keep it just that way.
Precisely.
Stay free.